My job tonight is to give a little report on the encuentro that just took place in Havana November 1st through 3rd. And that's really not possible in the amount of time that Elena is going to allow me. So
I'm going to be a little lenient with you.
Okay. So I'll do my best, and but as Pete mentioned, we're going to further discuss this at our meeting at party on Wednesday, so you're all welcome. As Pete mentioned, the Anti-Imperialist Conference for Democracy and Against Neoliberalism was attended by over 1,300 delegates, representing from more than, I think it was 86 countries, and representing more than 700 organizations that are involved in political struggles, social struggles around the world. There were women's organizations, organizations of Native peoples, organizations fighting for the rights of people of African descent, workers' organizations, climate activists, you name it, they were there. People fighting for political independence and sovereignty. 150 of those delegates were from the United States. And I can't tell you the number of organizations, but I can tell you that we ran into 3 other people from Miami that we didn't know from 3 other organizations in Miami. So that was exciting and impressive. And we hoped to, and we started working on making contacts and developing relations with them. Included in that delegation from the United States were also 20 students from the ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine. U.S. citizens, young people who are being trained as doctors in Cuba, full scholarships from Cuba, and who will be returning to their communities in the United States at some point to practice medicine. These delegates represented millions of people around the world who are part of struggles against the ravages of capitalism. Its institutions, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and the neoliberal policies of deregulation and privatization. This so-called world order, which really is a world disorder, demands that countries abandon their social priorities, like education, the environment, healthcare, in exchange for loans, investment, and so forth. And that policy, which is called neoliberalism, has created a social catastrophe. This is particularly true in Latin America. Latin America today has higher levels of inequality than any other place in the world. Its dependence on the United States of America is unparalleled. One example of this dependency is the fact that 80% of all internet traffic in the Americas runs through nodes that are controlled by the United States. Think about it. All the information, the news, everything that we get is run through these U.S. corporations and people who are controlling that flow of information. So the truth about real conditions and the social protests that are developing today is very hard to come by, especially in much of Latin America. The conference noted that the resistance to this process and these processes takes many forms. And today that resistance is alive and well. There are people taking to the streets of Chile, for example, protesting 30 years of the failure of the promised democracy and equality. Electoral challenges in places like Bolivia and Argentina. And there's the breadth of the conference reflected the breadth of this resistance. Country after country, delegate after delegate got up and spoke about what's going on in their home. And it was really very inspiring. We weren't the only ones that noticed this. Washington has noticed this. Washington sees what's happening in Latin America and in other parts of the world, and they are shaken by this resistance. Their response in recent months has been to focus their fire on Venezuela, which they spent a great deal of effort on trying to demonize the legitimately elected government of Venezuela, and ultimately on Cuba, which it holds responsible for any and all efforts in the world to fight against injustice. Anybody who is standing up against injustice must be controlled from Havana. It's kind of like, Pete said to me today, it's kind of like the mothership that infiltrates the psyche of oppressed people and causes them inexplicably to just rise up and take action. Washington strikes out at anyone who in turn tries to point the finger of blame at them. When we identify the culprit, they come after us. The tactics used by Washington in response to their loss of control over Venezuela's resources, in particular its oil, are not new. In fact, the attempt to starve out the Venezuelan people and impose a regime friendly to Washington mirrors very, very closely what has been described here tonight about the processes that Washington, the policies that Washington has unleashed over the year on Cuba. It was mentioned that it's been 59 years since the blockade, the embargo, was initiated. In 1960, one of Eisenhower's advisors, Lester Mallory, wrote that the only foreseeable means of overthrowing the Cuban government was to alienate internal support based on economic dissatisfaction and hardship, to bring about hunger and desperation. What the Cuban people have to put up with today is not an accident. It's not a byproduct. It's actually the intent. That is what the U.S. government wants. That's what the policy is directed at. And it was the basis of the imposition of the first economic sanctions under Eisenhower, and it's been the basis of the policy of both governing parties now for 60 years. Accompanied, of course, by military intervention, military threats, hundreds of covert actions, assassination attempts, actual assassinations, like the assassination of Carlos Muñiz Varela, who was a member of the Antonio Maceo Brigade and was assassinated not in Cuba, but in the streets of Puerto Rico, the U.S. colony. So Washington has been doing this for 60 years, and for 60 years, Cuba has been standing up and fighting back and building a proud and healthy and educated nation, which is filled with people who are ready to defend their homeland and their achievements and to fight back not with weapons, but with solidarity. This conference was an example of how Cuba fights, building solidarity among the peoples around the world. Our delegation was able to see a lot of different examples of how this process works in Cuba, and hopefully in the discussion, a couple of other members of the delegation will share their experiences. We were able to visit the ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine, where students from around the world come to train as doctors, and the only commitment that they make to receive this scholarship is to go home and serve their communities, their barrios, to bring medical care to the people that, to their families and their communities. They exemplify the personal sacrifice that is part of Cuba's spirit of internationalism. And the students, there was one really poignant poem read by a Palestinian student about how homesick he was and how much he missed his mother on the one hand, and on the other hand, how proud and overjoyed he was to be getting this experience in Cuba and how important it was to him. We met with a 70-year-old man who joined the revolutionary forces at age 16. He described not only the economic challenges of the blockade, but the toll that it takes on the consciousness of workers and on the moral fiber of those who are responsible for distributing these scarce goods and commodities. It starts to wear people down. Nonetheless, he assured us that Cuba is moving forward. Slowly, he said, sometimes with missteps and errors, but always forward. Pete and I were assisted with some travel issues by a woman named Luanda, who proudly explained to us that her father gave her the name while he was deployed to Angola to fight the South African apartheid army. Yet another example of Cuba's spirit of internationalism. And then we joined the entire population of Barbosa, which is a municipality near Havana, in a raucous and joyful rally in concert against imperialism. The entire town turned out. The kids, the grandmothers, everybody. So it's no surprise that for the millions whose countries have been decimated by the greed of the transnationals and their local lackeys, Bolsonaros and so forth, Cuba shines as a beacon of hope. Cuba is the proof that working people can organize society to defend their own interests. It's the proof that even a small country can stand up to Washington and its might. And it's the proof that not only is it possible to stand up and to resist, but it is possible to move forward at the same time. Not as fast as they would like, but nevertheless forward. And that optimism really, really permeates every conversation. The delegates were inspired by the opportunities for change that are apparent around the world. And although there are a lot of different ideas about how each country, each struggle should move forward, there was clear agreement on the need to unify in action in solidarity with Cuba, against the blockade, against U.S. intervention in the affairs of Venezuela, and in solidarity with the many struggles for independence and sovereignty around the globe. Initially, the conference draft resolution called for the removal of the Trump administration as its first point of action. But the Puerto Rican delegation made a compelling argument that Trump is not the problem. The problem is the bipartisan agreement for 60 years on the blockade of Cuba.
Yes.
No digo buenas noches, como se acostumbra a iniciar el discurso de un orador, porque el tiempo no ha sido propicio. Pero aquí estamos, como tantas veces, reunidos norteamericanos, cubanos y latinoamericanos que defendemos la causa justa de la independencia y la libertad de los pueblos de América. Hoy el tema es Cuba y el bloqueo. Son 60 años de intentos inútiles por doblegar a un pueblo rebelde que representa la conciencia de América. Y el mundo corresponde a Cuba, diciéndole no al bloqueo en la última reunión de la Organización de Naciones Unidas, donde para bochorno del pueblo americano, no porque el pueblo americano apoye el bloqueo a Cuba, sino porque es una operación política de menor cuantía por razones electorales para complacer a la extrema derecha cubana de Miami.
We have to add
Tres
three.
tristes tigres,
Three sad tigers.
para decirlo con palabras de un escritor cubano. Tres terribles enemigos de la causa de los pueblos: el Trump norteamericano, el Bolsonaro de Brasil y el Netanyahu de Israel. Yo no digo que el pueblo norteamericano esté representado por esa delegación en Naciones Unidas. que el pueblo brasileño esté representado por la delegación de Bolsonaro. Y yo no digo que el pueblo de Israel esté representado por ese voto sucio contra Cuba y la dignidad de América. Yo tengo hijas ciudadanas de los Estados Unidos. La gente joven, la que estudió en este país, la que conoce las entrañas de esta nación. Yo sé que Brasil no es Bolsonaro, Brasil es Lula da Silva. Brasil es el pobre y el negro de las favelas. Brasil es el carioca que ríe cuando debiera llorar. Ese Brasil, quien lo representa, es Ignacio Lula da Silva. Y yo, que soy cubano, pero que llevo sangre judía por mi padre, también les digo que si al pueblo de Israel le consultaran directamente qué piensa del embargo, dirá con vocación de libertad no al bloqueo a Cuba, aunque lo pida el señor Trump. Hablo aquí en nombre de la coalición Alianza Martiana, una organización compuesta por cubanos y latinoamericanos y algunos que otros norteamericanos también, que está esta organización desde hace mucho tiempo en pie de lucha por defender la dignidad de América. Y esta no será la única reunión donde estas caras se encuentren. Vivimos en un país donde el destino se decide en la urna. Y en esa urna se depositarán los votos de los norteamericanos que crean y sueñen con que este también puede ser un gran país. Y yo les digo que si alguna vez Estados Unidos ha tenido momentos de rechazo, no es solamente cuando los Marines desembarcaban en tierras de América para imponer tiranuelos. Hoy, en este mundo convulso, que no por gusto está más convulso desde que el presidente se llama Donald Trump, ese debate no es entre la izquierda y la derecha. Tan es así que viajeros que vienen de Europa o de América Latina o de Asia o de África, si le preguntan cuál es el presidente norteamericano más rechazado de la historia de los últimos 50 años, es el señor Donald Trump.
It's Donald Trump.
Yo no vengo aquí a hacer política por un partido o por un candidato. Es más, yo no tengo afiliación política en Estados Unidos. Pero si en Cuba, que es mi país, y en América Latina, que es mi segunda patria, y si en Estados Unidos, que sería mi tercera, le preguntaran a los pueblos qué opinan de la política exterior de Estados Unidos hacia Cuba, el grito en la urna o en la calle o en la conciencia sería no al bloqueo norteamericano a Cuba. Sí a la unidad de los pueblos, sí al grito de rebeldía de los pueblos, sí a la unidad de la izquierda mundial. La conciencia del mundo está con nosotros.
The conscience of the world is
Muchas
with
gracias.
us. Thank you.